When they tried to put the largest ship in human history into the water, it refused to move. It sat stranded on its rails beside the river for nearly 3 months, swallowing fortunes by the day, while men died trying to force it toward the water, and a watching nation began to laugh. The man who designed it would be dead within 2 years, his health broken by the strain. Almost everyone who put money into it would be ruined. And yet, against all of that, this cursed and impossible ship would go on to do something no other vessel on Earth could do, something that quietly stitched the modern world together. This is the story of a machine that was a financial disaster and an engineering triumph at the very same moment, built by people who believed it could be done. To understand how something this enormous came to exist at all, you have to picture the most celebrated engineer of the Victorian age. A small man in a tall stovepipe hat, a cigar almost always in his mouth, who had already given Britain railways, tunnels, and bridges that still carry traffic today. He thought on a scale that frightened ordinary men. And in the early 1850s, he became fixated on a single staggering idea: a ship large enough to sail all the way to Australia and back without ever stopping for coal. Every ship afloat at that time was tiny by comparison. His vision was for something 6 times larger by volume than anything that had ever been built. Nearly 700 feet of iron, longer than 2 football fields laid end to end, tall as a city building, carried on gigantic paddle wheels and a single screw beneath the water, with 6 masts of sail above. It could carry 4,000 passengers. To grasp how far ahead of its time it was, consider this: no one would build a larger ship anywhere in the world for the next 40 years. He partnered with an experienced shipbuilder to make it real. And here, the trouble began, quietly at first. What the designer did not fully know was that his builder was already sliding toward financial collapse. The costs climbed past every estimate. The money ran low, then ran out. The designer began paying the workers out of his own pocket, refusing to take a fee himself, pouring his personal fortune into the iron hull rising on the bank of the Thames. Now, before this story turns, hold a question in your mind. Was this man a visionary, building something the world was simply not ready for, punished only because he arrived too early? Or was he a stubborn genius whose obsession with size blinded him to reason, dragging everyone who trusted him toward ruin? Genius or folly? Choose now, and notice whether the answer still holds by the end, because this is one of those stories where the honest people genuinely disagree. The day of the launch was meant to be his triumph. The hull was so vast it could not slide into the river end first like a normal ship. It had to be eased in sideways, inch by inch, down a set of rails. A huge crowd gathered, and then nothing. The Colossus would not budge. The chains and winches meant to control its descent could not overcome the friction of all that iron. In the chaos, the heavy machinery spun wildly, and men were caught and lost. The launch failed, completely and publicly. The press, which had cheered, now turned vicious. They began to call it an unlucky ship. For nearly 3 months, the giant sat stranded, neither on land nor at sea, while the engineer brought in ever more powerful hydraulic rams to shove it the final distance to the water. It cost a staggering sum, money that no longer existed. When the hull at last floated free on a high tide, there was almost nothing left to finish it with. The company that had ordered it was sinking into bankruptcy. New investors were found. Then they too went under. The ship changed hands, each owner poorer than the last. And then, the cruelest blow of all. During the ship's first sea trials, a valve had been left closed by mistake, and pressure built with nowhere to go. An explosion tore through the vessel, killing several of the crew. The designer was already gravely ill, his body wrecked by years of relentless strain over this one creation. When the news of the disaster reached him, he survived only days. The greatest engineer of his century died believing his masterpiece was a failure, built by a man who believed it could be done and never lived to see that he was right. Earlier, I asked you to decide, genius or folly? Sit with it now, because here is where the story refuses to behave. By every measure that mattered to its creator, the ship was a catastrophe. It was too large for the harbors of its day. It could never fill its cabins. The opening of a new canal in Egypt erased the very long routes it had been built to serve. As a passenger liner, it lost money for everyone who touched it, voyage after voyage, exactly as the doubters had warned. If you called it folly, the early evidence is firmly on your side. And yet, in its desperation, sold off cheap, the ruined giant was handed a strange new purpose. There was a dream in those years of laying a telegraph cable along the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, a copper thread connecting Europe to America, so that a message that once took 10 days by ship could cross in minutes. The problem was that no vessel on Earth was big enough to carry the immense, impossibly heavy coil of cable required. No vessel except one. The very size that had ruined this ship as a passenger liner was suddenly the only thing that made the impossible possible. So the cursed ship sailed out, mile after mile, paying out its precious thread behind it across the loneliest stretch of ocean in the world. The first attempt broke and was lost in the deep. It returned and tried again. And in the summer of 1866, the connection held. For the first time in history, a person in London could send words to a person in America and receive a reply the same day. The world had, in a real sense, just become smaller. And the machine that did it was the failure nobody had wanted. If you changed your mind somewhere in the last few minutes, you are in the very best of company, because historians still argue this one to a standstill. Tell me where you finally landed and what tipped you. What truly lingers about this story is the cruel gap in its timing. The ship was not wrong. It was simply early by about 40 years, born into a world that had no use yet for something so vast. Its creator died in defeat, never knowing that his impossible babe would go on to link 2 continents and lay the groundwork for the connected world we now take entirely for granted. The knowledge did not vanish. It waited. And when the world finally caught up to the size of his ambition, the principles he fought and bled for were simply there, ready, proven on the bank of the Thames, decades before anyone needed them. It was built by people who believed it could be done, and that's worth remembering. If stories like this one stay with you, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week we bring one more lost machine back to life and tell you the story the history books left out.